Look, I'm not the type of person who believes in ghosts. Like, at all. I'm the girl who laughs at horror movies, the one who always has a logical explanation for weird noises in the night. Creaky floorboard? Old house settling. Shadow in the corner? Just your eyes playing tricks on you in the dark. But after what happened at my grandparents' place last summer? Yeah, let's just say I'm a lot less skeptical now. It all started innocently enough. My mom had been bugging me for weeks to visit Grandma and Grandpachin. Maya, you haven't seen them in almost a year, she'd say, guilt-tripping me like only an Asian mom can. They're getting older. What if something happens? So there I was, 23 years old, fresh out of college, unemployed, and living in my childhood bedroom, with absolutely no excuse not to make the 4-hour drive to their place in Millbrook. It's one of those small towns where everyone knows everyone, where the biggest excitement is when they get a new flavor at the ice cream shop, and where time seems to move at half speed compared to the rest of the world. The drive itself was fine. I blasted my playlist, sang off-key to songs I'd listened to a million times, and watched the city gradually give way to suburbs, then farmland, then the dense woods that surrounded Millbrook like a dark green fortress. I pulled up to their house around 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. The place looked exactly like I remembered, a 2-story colonial painted pale yellow with white trim, flower boxes under the windows, Grandma's pride and joy, and that weird garden gnome by the mailbox that had always creeped me out as a kid. Seriously, who makes garden gnomes with faces like that? It looked like it was plotting something. But as I grabbed my duffel bag from the trunk and started walking up the path, I felt it. This weird heaviness in the air. Like the atmosphere itself had weight to it. The kind of feeling you get right before a thunderstorm, when the air pressure drops and everything goes still and waiting. I shook it off. Probably just tired from the drive. Grandma, Grandpa, I'm here. I called out as I pushed open the front door. They never locked it during the day. Small town life, you know? The house was quiet. Too quiet. Usually, Grandma would have the TV on, she was obsessed with her cooking shows, or Grandpa would be puttering around in his workshop in the garage, classic rock playing loud enough to wake the dead. Poor choice of words, as it turned out. Hello. I stepped into the foyer, and that's when I noticed the smell. Not bad, exactly, but off. Like old flowers mixed with something metallic and sharp. And underneath it all, this weird mustiness that made my nose wrinkle. The living room looked normal enough. Same floral couch that had been there since the Clinton administration. Same family photos on the mantel. Same ugly ceramic cat that Grandma insisted was vintage and valuable. But there was something wrong with the light. Even though it was a bright afternoon outside, the sunlight coming through the windows seemed dim, filtered, like it was struggling to penetrate the house. Maya. Oh, sweetheart, you made it. I jumped about a foot in the air as Grandma appeared in the doorway to the kitchen. She moved so quietly I hadn't heard her coming. Grandma, you scared me. I laughed, trying to shake off the weird vibe I was getting. I went over to hug her, and that's when I got my first real indication that something was seriously wrong. She was cold. Like ice cold. And I don't mean her hands were a little chilly, I mean her whole body felt like she'd been standing in a freezer. Through her cardigan, through her blouse, her skin was absolutely frigid. Are you feeling okay? I pulled back to look at her face. She looked tired. No, more than tired. Exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes that I'd never seen before, and her skin had this grayish tint that made my stomach clench with worry. Oh, I'm fine, dear. Just haven't been sleeping well. She waved a hand dismissively, but I noticed it trembled slightly. Your grandfather is upstairs resting. He hasn't been feeling well either. Maybe you guys should see a doctor. We're fine, she said, and her voice had this edge to it that made me shut up immediately. Grandma was usually the sweetest person alive, all warm hugs and homemade cookies. This sharp tone was completely unlike her. She seemed to realize it too, because her expression softened. I'm sorry, Maya. I didn't mean to snap. We're just tired. It's been a difficult few weeks. What's been going on? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For a second, I could have sworn I saw something flicker across her face, fear, but then it was gone, replaced by that same exhausted smile. Nothing, dear. Just old age catching up with us. Come, let me make you some tea. I followed her into the kitchen, my unease growing with every step. The kitchen was Grandma's domain, usually spotless and smelling like whatever delicious thing she'd been baking. But now, dishes were piled in the sink. The counters were cluttered. And that weird smell was stronger here, definitely coming from the flowers in a vase on the table. They were dead, brown and wilted, but nobody had thrown them out. Grandma, when did those flowers? Mrs. Chin. Mrs. Chin, are you home? The voice came from the back door, accompanied by aggressive knocking. Through the window, I could see a woman in her 60s with aggressively permed hair and a neon pink tracksuit that hurt to look at. Grandma's whole body went rigid. Oh no, she whispered. Not her. Not now. Who's that? Mrs. Patterson. The neighbor. Grandma said it like she was saying the plague or the IRS. The knocking got louder. I know you're in there. I saw the car pull up. Should I? I gestured toward the door. No, don't, but I was already opening it. Mrs. Patterson practically fell into the kitchen, her eyes wide and gleaming with the kind of excitement that only comes from having juicy gossip to share. Oh, you must be the granddaughter. Maya, right? I've heard so much about you. Hi. Nice to meet you. Is it though? She pushed past me, zeroing in on Grandma like a heat-seeking missile. Margaret, we need to talk. The noises last night were even worse than before. My husband couldn't sleep at all. And the lights. The lights in your upstairs windows were flickering on and off until 4 a.m. I'm sure it was just. And that's not even the strangest part. Mrs. Patterson was on a roll now, her voice getting higher and more dramatic with each word. I saw someone in your upstairs window. A woman. But it wasn't you, Margaret. This woman had long black hair and she was just standing there, staring out at the street. For hours. The temperature in the kitchen seemed to drop about 10 degrees. I saw Grandma's hands clench into fists, her knuckles going white. There's no one else in this house, Grandma said quietly. You must have been mistaken. I know what I saw. And I'm not the only one. Carol from down the street? She said she heard screaming coming from your house 3 nights ago. Screaming and crying and, that's enough. Grandma's voice was steel. I think you should leave now, Patricia. Well, I never. Now. Mrs. Patterson huffed, shot me a look that clearly said your grandmother has lost her mind, and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Grandma, I said carefully. What was she talking about? Nothing. She's a busybody who makes up stories for attention. But Grandma wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm going to check on your grandfather. Why don't you get settled in your room? She left before I could ask any more questions. I stood there in the kitchen, my heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. Noises. Lights flickering. A woman with long black hair in the window. Screaming. And my grandparents, both looking like death warmed over, insisting everything was fine. Yeah, everything was definitely not fine. I grabbed my bag and headed upstairs, my footsteps echoing in the quiet house. The second floor was just as I remembered, narrow hallway with 4 doors. My grandparents' bedroom at the end. The guest room where I always stayed on the right. The bathroom on the left. And the spare room, the one they used for storage, next to the guest room. The door to the spare room was closed. It was always closed. But as I walked past it, I felt that same heaviness in the air intensify. And I could have absolutely sworn, I heard something from inside. A whisper. Soft and sibilant, like wind through dead leaves. Or like someone saying my name. I froze, my hand on the guest room doorknob, every instinct screaming at me to run. But that's ridiculous, right? It was just an old house. Old houses make weird noises. That's like a scientific fact or something. I forced myself to open the guest room door and go inside. The room was exactly as I remembered, floral wallpaper that was probably older than me, a double bed with a handmade quilt, a dresser with a mirror, and a window overlooking the backyard. I dropped my bag on the bed and went to the window. The backyard looked overgrown, which was weird. Grandpa usually kept it immaculate. But now the grass was knee-high, and the garden was a tangle of weeds. And there, right in the center of the yard, was something I'd never seen before. A circle of dead grass. Perfectly round, maybe 10 feet in diameter. Nothing grew inside it. The earth looked scorched, blackened, like something had burned it from underneath. "What the hell?" I whispered. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, my heart in my throat, but the room was empty. Of course it was empty. I was alone. Except, I didn't feel alone. I felt watched. Like there were eyes on me from every corner, every shadow. I grabbed my phone, suddenly desperate to hear a familiar voice. But when I looked at the screen, I had no signal. None. Not even one bar. You've got to be kidding me. I tried to remember if my grandparents had Wi-Fi. Probably not. They still had a landline, for crying out loud. Another creak, this time from the hallway. Then another. Like footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming toward my room. "Grandma?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Grandpa?" The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I stared at it, barely breathing, waiting for it to open. Waiting for someone to come in. But nothing happened. The door stayed closed. The footsteps didn't continue. And somehow, that was worse. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, staring at that door. It felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. Finally, I forced myself to move. I crossed the room in 3 quick steps and yanked the door open. The hallway was empty. But the door to the spare room, the storage room, was open now. Just a crack. Just enough for darkness to seep out into the hallway. I knew, with absolute certainty, that it had been closed before. "Okay," I said out loud, trying to keep my voice steady. "Okay, this is fine. This is totally fine. Old houses. Doors don't latch properly. Totally normal." I was lying to myself and I knew it. But what was I supposed to do? Run screaming to my car and drive home? Tell my grandparents their house was haunted? They'd think I was crazy. Hell, I was starting to think I was crazy. I needed to get out of this hallway. I needed to be around people, even if those people were my weirdly cold and exhausted grandparents. I practically ran down the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, and burst into the living room. Grandpa was there now, sitting in his recliner. He looked even worse than Grandma, gaunt, pale, with those same dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw me, his face lit up with a smile that was pure Grandpa. "Maya, there's my favorite granddaughter. I'm your only granddaughter, Grandpa. That's why you're my favorite." He started to laugh, but it turned into a cough that sounded wet and painful. I sat on the couch across from him, studying his face. "Grandpa, are you okay? You and Grandma both look really sick." "Oh, we're fine. Just a bug going around." He waved it off, but I noticed his hand was shaking too. "How was the drive? Any trouble finding the place?" We made small talk for a while, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. The way he kept glancing at the stairs. The way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The way the shadows in the corners of the room seemed darker than they should be. And then, right in the middle of telling me about his tomato plants, he stopped. Just stopped talking mid-sentence. His eyes went unfocused, staring at something over my shoulder. "Grandpa?" He didn't respond. Didn't even blink. "Grandpa." I stood up, my heart racing. "Grandpa, can you hear me?" His mouth opened. And in a voice that was absolutely not his, a voice that was too high, too feminine, too wrong, he said, "She's been waiting for you, Maya. She's been waiting such a long time." Then he blinked and he was back. Normal. Confused. "What?" "Sorry, dear, I must have dozed off for a second. What were we talking about?" I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Couldn't do anything but stare at my grandfather and try to convince myself that I hadn't just heard what I'd heard. This was going to be a very long visit. And somewhere in the house, I could have sworn I heard laughter. Soft and cold and utterly inhuman.